Chapter 234. Remember to stay here and don't run around. I'll be back soon. This narrow alley was not big and seemed to be safe. Sheng Guanyut said a few words to her and then turned to leave. This man was really good at hiding things. Shen Yueji looked at his back as he left. It was not difficult to ignore the strong murderous aura that filled the air at that moment. He knew martial arts, and at a very high level. According to her own memory, Sheng Guanyu did not seem to know martial arts at all. Shen Yueji took a step back and leaned against the wall. She did not know if there was anyone following them, but she could not be more familiar with a person. From the moment he came, she had sensed it. She narrowed her eyes, crossed her arms, and glanced at the deserted alley. Come out. Mo Wusheng, dressed in a black robe, descended from the sky like a god. His handsome face was stained with layers of coldness at this moment. His pair of cold eyes, as if frozen, fell on Shen Yueji's indifferent face without blinking. He glanced at her and very naturally walked in front of Shen Yueji. He stretched out his hand and pulled her into his arms. He said in a muffled voice, "You are not allowed to hang out with other men." To be honest, I really did not intend to hang out with this man. You have been here for so long. Do you know who the people following us are? Shen Yueji let him hug her as she poked his hard chest with her finger. She was not surprised to see Mo Wusheng. His mansion was in the capital. After she returned to the mansion, he naturally returned to his Prince Regent's mansion. If he wanted to see her, it would be easier than entering the palace. Although Shen Yueji only discovered this after returning to the mansion. It's people from the Gu family. Gu family. Shen Yueji quickly understood the meaning of these 5 simple words. She narrowed her eyes. Gu family. They know that I left the mansion so quickly. From the palace to the capital, it only took a few hours. If it was the Gu family, according to Gu Wei's means, he would not directly order people to secretly follow her to hurt her. Was it Gu Yueyin? Other than Gu Yueyin, Shen Yueji couldn't think of anyone else in the Gu family who could be so fast to send someone to follow her so quickly. Shen Yueji had guessed that Gu Yueyin wouldn't obediently swallow her anger after Feng Zhiqing took her out of the palace this time. This was out of Shen Yueji's expectations. Why was she so impatient? As if she had thought of something, Shen Yueji suddenly smiled. Meeting the man's eyes, she opened her mouth. It's rare for me to leave the palace this time. I really can't stay in the general's mansion as the emperor wishes, don't you think so, Regent? The man's eyes flickered. He pinched her chin and rubbed his fingers against her smooth chin. Actually, you can also live in my residence. This man, can't you think of something good in your head? Slapping his hand away, Shen Yueji couldn't help but kick him. The man didn't dodge and let her kick him. Shen Yueji kicked him, but her anger was still not appeased. She pulled his hand over and bit down hard on it, until she saw rows of teeth marks on the back of his hand. She licked her lips and stared at him for a long time. Does it hurt? Mo Wusheng shook his head. His round fingers touched her lips again, and his black eyes brightened. Live with me. No, what would it be like to live with you? I am the emperor's concubine. Besides, father and mother will not agree. Chapter 235. Shen Yueji had a headache and held her forehead. She had no doubt that her 2 weird parents must be in a hurry to let her live with Mo Wusheng. The problem was, it was hard for them to let her, a woman, deal with so many men. How much effort did they have? How is my second brother's matter going? If nothing goes wrong, he will return to the capital tonight. Tonight? Shen Yueji smiled and nodded, so, I will see Li Yingying soon. Li Yingying. The man raised his eyebrows. Shen Yueji deliberately kept him guessing, as if thinking of something funny. When do you plan to return to the mansion? I will be with you. I will stay in the mansion for a few days. You can come to see me at any time. I just said, when do you plan to return today? Looking at the man's dissatisfied expression, Shin Yueji's mouth twitched. Are you going to stick to me for a few days? Miss, Shuangshi's worried voice suddenly came from outside. Here. Shin Yueji waved at her. Seeing her, Shuangshi quickly ran towards her with the osmanthus cake and a bag of silver. Regent. As she approached, she found that Sheng Wanyu, who was standing next to her miss, had become Mo Wushang. Her little face, which was full of joy, immediately changed color. Well, Regent, I pay my respects to Regent. Mo Wushang didn't look at her, but took the osmanthus cake in her hand, took a piece and put it to Shin Yueji's mouth. Shin Yueji's little heart was beating fast. She opened her mouth and took a bite. It was sweet but not greasy. When she was about to take a second bite, he had already opened his mouth and threw the half she had bitten into his mouth. She covered her mouth and coughed awkwardly. Don't worry, someone is following us. Young Master Shengwan is going to deal with them. Ah. Shuangshi blinked, but Miss, young Master Shengwan doesn't know martial arts. I didn't feel the existence of those people who are secretly following us. They must be very good at martial arts. Will young Master Shengwan be in trouble if he goes to find them? He doesn't know martial arts. Shin Yueji looked at him. Do you know him very well? In my opinion, his martial arts are not weak. Just as Double Happiness said, she did not know that someone was following her. Even she did not feel it. One could imagine how high Shengwan Yu's martial arts were. Shuangshi still wanted to say something, but the man shot her a cold look. Are you very free? These cold, simple, and concise words made Double Happiness shiver. He quickly shook his head. No, I'm not idle. I'm very, very busy. Miss, do you and the Prince Regent want to go to the tea house in the opposite room? When did I say that? The Phoenix Tea House opposite is where Miss used to like to sit. The place is spacious, soft and comfortable, and there are a lot of dishes. Shuangshi hugged the heavy silver. Miss is not in a hurry. Anyway, the capital is so big, you won't be able to finish shopping in a short amount of time. Also, Miss has stayed in the Fu for 3 to 4 days. Since you just returned to the capital, you should rest first and recover your energy before going shopping. Isn't that right, son-in-law? With that, she didn't forget to glance at Mo Wushang and even changed the way she addressed him. Shin Yueji. Chapter 236. Shuangshi was overjoyed. Her hands that were holding the silver were trembling. After a long time, she squeezed out a sentence excitedly. Thank you, young master. No, Shin Yueji was upset. She wanted to say something, but the man had already carried her off the ground. She glanced at Shuangshi, who was so happy that she was about to ascend to heaven. With a gloomy face, he said, I say, that silver was given to me by my parents. When did it become yours? What's yours is mine. What about yours? What's mine is yours. As the regent of the Feng nation, Mo Wushang did not only have great power, but also wealth that could rival a nation. The problem was, Shin Yueji was still conflicted about the big bag of silver in Shuangshi's arms. Do you know that the silver in her arms is enough to feed a small village for a lifetime? Moreover, it's the kind that eats meat every day and wears silk. Perhaps it was because of her seriousness that the man's dark eyes fell on her and he listened to her seriously. Grabbing his collar with both hands, Shin Yueji said seriously, Shuangshi serves me. Not only does my parents give her benefits, but even I give her silver on time every month. Sometimes, I give her the jewelry that I don't want. Look at my jewelry, which one of them isn't expensive? I'm not stingy and give them all to her. She has already taken a lot of benefits from me. You are my man. You can't be partial to her. Give her all the silver that my parents gave me. This way, she won't be loyal to me. She mumbled. Realizing that something was wrong, the man's handsome face suddenly moved closer to her. Her lips felt warm. The man sucked on her delicate lips and nibbled a few times. Then, Shinyuaji felt herself falling rapidly in his arms. On the other side, Shuangshi was holding a bag full of silver and seeing stars. She took a silver ingot and put it in her mouth and bit it hard. She was extremely excited. The next second, a cold wind blew and her vision went black. After a while, her vision cleared up, but before she could see clearly who it was, the big bag of silver in her arms was gone just like that. She looked down in horror. Where was the silver? Where was the silver? She opened her mouth wide in surprise. The smile and pride on her face were still frozen on her face, and she didn't have time to change her expression. Silver. Returning to midair, Shin Yueji happily reached out towards Mo Wushang, wanting to take back the bag of silver. In the end, he casually tossed the bag of silver onto the ground. The passers-by on the street saw it and immediately snatched it up in a frenzy. Soon, it was all gone, leaving behind a lonely piece of cloth. Without the weight of the silver, it fluttered in the wind. Her trembling hands climbed onto the man's chest. Mo Wushang was puzzled by her sudden malevolent expression. Shin Yueji angrily gnawed and bit his exposed neck. The man's pitch-black eyes flickered with lust. He tightened his grip on her waist and said in a hoarse voice, don't rush, don't worry your grandpa. She only said that it was a pity to give so much money to Shuangshi, and asked him to take it back and return it to her. In the end, he just threw it all to the people below. He might as well give it all to Shuangshi. Shin Yueji's breath was stuck in her throat, and she couldn't breathe for a long time. Put me down. What's wrong? Put me down. Mo Wushang didn't know how he had offended her and was a little flustered. Are you going to put me down or not? Mo Wushang, I'm telling you. Chapter 237. The man's big hand froze and landed on a roof with her in his arms. His deep eyes were locked on her little face that was filled with anger. He pursed his red lips and did not say a word. Shin Yueji was just about to go down when she glanced at the people on the street. With such a high roof, one could have a panoramic view of the capital city. Her little face darkened. Obviously, Mo Wushang had put her at the highest place. Big brother is going back to the mansion today. I have to go back and wait for him. She glanced at the man and motioned for him to carry her down. Mo Wushang turned his back indifferently. What do you want? Shin Yueji leapt in front of him in 2 steps and looked straight at his frosty face. Forget it if you don't want to say anything. It's not like I can't go down myself. Shin Yueji didn't care. She closed her eyes and jumped down. It was all his fault if she fell and became handicapped. It was as if she knew that the man would hold her, so Shin Yueji jumped without hesitation. She just felt her body falling down, and the next second, her waist was held by the man. She opened her eyes and met the man's dark eyes. They were as bright as stars. Mo Wushang held her firmly in his arms. His cold voice was hoarse as he buried his head in her neck. I want everything of you. But you are not obedient. I am obedient. You always force me. The man's Adam's apple moved and his handsome face rubbed against her neck. I didn't force you. Yes. No. Yes. If G.R. says yes, then yes. Shin Yueji was satisfied that she had the upper hand in words. She leaned in the man's arms and was as obedient as a kitten. Do you know how much money my parents gave me? I asked you to snatch it back from me, but you just threw the money to those people. If I knew you were like this, I wouldn't have asked you to snatch it from Shuangxi's arms. She could just go back and give it to Shuangxi. Yes. Money is just a worldly possession. What? You. If you have me, then you have everything. The man carefully rubbed her neck with his crimson lips, enjoying the tenderness and sweetness inside. Everything I have is yours. Shin Yueji blushed and pushed his head away. My mother often said that a man's mouth is a liar. I did not lie to you. Whether or not you're lying to me is not something that you can just say with your mouth. I'm already tired of hearing such promises. Anyone would be able to say that. Shin Yueji pushed him away and sat alone on the roof. Her heart was in a mess after Mo Wushang's antics, and she no longer had the mood to continue playing. Just like that, the two of them sat silently for a while. Shin Yueji saw Shang Guanyu's slender figure flash into the alley. Shuangxi was hugging the silver and crying to herself. Seeing a white brocade robe in front of her, she raised her head with tears in her eyes. When she saw Shang Guanyu's handsome, warm, and somewhat evil face, she didn't know if it was an illusion, but the evil aura that flashed by made her feel like she was seeing things. Young Master Shangguan, she sobbed. Not seeing Shin Yueji, Shang Guanyu frowned. Shuangxi, where's your miss? Miss, Shuangxi continued sobbing. Young Master Shangguan, don't worry. Miss is fine, but I have something. Chapter 238. Silver. Silver. I don't know which bastard stole all the silver that the regent gave me. Double Happiness hugged her empty arms, as if the warmth of the silver was still there. Why was her life so bitter? She had finally gotten so much silver, enough for her to live a carefree and happy life for so long. Suddenly, it was gone. Everything was gone. Sob, sob, sob. It was so sad. The regent. Mo Wushang. Shang Guanyu's gentle face suddenly changed. He had seen Ji Er's feelings for Mo Wushang all these years. Seeing his beloved woman throwing herself at that man, he couldn't tell what he was feeling in his heart. After she entered the palace, he thought she had already given up on Mo Wushang. He didn't expect that she would be with him again. Shang Guanyu couldn't help but clench his fists under his robe. There was a layer of coldness on his handsome face, but when Shuangxi looked at him, he quickly hid the coldness and smiled at Shuangxi. Where did the regent take Ji Er? Young Master Shangguan, don't go. I don't know what's wrong with the regent recently. He's been very nice to my Mississippi. He must have taken her to some interesting place. I'm afraid that young Master Shangguan will go after her. Miss is fine, but I'm afraid that the regent. After all, Mo Wushang was famous for being cold and bloodthirsty in the whole Feng country. She was afraid that if Shang Guanyu went after her, it would be dangerous. Shang Guanyu obviously didn't think so. Double Happiness, I brought your miss out of the mansion. I should bring her back. But, Double Happiness was hesitant. Looking at Shang Guanyu's expectant eyes, she stamped her feet and said, Young Master Shangguan, I'll tell you the truth. Although I like your love for Miss for so many years, I think you're the best man in the world and worthy of Miss's lifelong commitment. But this servant is just a servant girl after all, and cannot control Miss's thoughts. What this servant can do is, whoever Miss likes, this servant will do my best to help Mississippi. Young Master Shangguan, you've seen it. Whether it's in the past or now, Miss has never treated you as a man and a woman, including now. When we were in the mansion today, I've already asked Miss about it. Mrs. Reply was firm and decisive. She felt that young Master Shengguan deserved better. Shengguan Yu didn't doubt her words at all. Shuangshi was her maid, so he knew that Shen Yueji must have told her this personally. For a moment, he almost couldn't breathe. His face was as white as a sheet of paper. At this moment, it was as if a gust of wind could blow and he would fall to the ground powerlessly. Even so, he did not give up and continued to ask, "These were all personally told by your young Mississippi." Double Happiness didn't dare to look at his injured face. Emotionally, even Double Happiness felt that her young miss had gone too far. Young Master Shengguan was such a good person, but her young miss hurt him from time to time. In the past, she beat him, scolded him, and humiliated him. Although she didn't beat him or scold him anymore, if she was decisive, she might as well have beaten him and humiliated him in the past. However, the other party was her young Mississippi. Double Happiness couldn't do anything. Although she sympathized with Shengguan Yu, her heart was biased towards her young Mississippi. She was biased towards her young miss like a mountain. Chapter 239. The Prince Regent can compete with the Emperor, but young Master Shengguan, you are the Emperor's subjects and people. If you do this, you will implicate the whole Shengguan family. Double Happiness said a lot to him, but Shengguan Yu didn't listen to a word. He staggered and turned to leave. His back was unprecedentedly lonely. Double Happiness wanted to stop him, but the words were on the tip of her tongue. She wasn't her mistress, so what was the use of calling him? Moreover, she was the one who should be sad at this moment. She hugged herself and squatted on the ground again, crying. Her silver, sob sob sob, which damned bastard dared to steal her silver, sob sob sob. Shengguan Yu walked for a long, long time. For such a long time, from day to night, he didn't know where he was. He went back and forth, stopped and walked. Unknowingly, he had gone back and forth in the huge capital, going in circles for so long. He raised his head and looked at the drunken joy house in front of him, which was surrounded by lights and ambiguous atmosphere. He stopped here and stared at the plaque of the drunken joy house for a long time. The drunken joy house was the largest brothel in the capital. It was full of business day and night, and never stopped. Whether it was day or night, there seemed to be endless people coming and going. From inside came the sounds of laughter, the delicate voice of a woman, and the laughter of a man who was laughing wantonly. For some reason, the legs that stopped seemed to be attracted by a magic force, and he stepped into the drunken joy house. He had never been to such a place before. This was the first time. Inside, there were all kinds of women dressed in revealing clothes. Compared with the restraint and poetry writing in the daytime, they seemed to be a lot bolder at night. They didn't wear much clothes, only covering their private parts. Their arms were around the men next to them. Their red lips, snow-white skin, every part made one's imagination run wild. Shengguan Yu's eyes glanced at each other. At this time, an old mother who was over her middle age and still dressed beautifully came towards him. She couldn't hide the amazement in her eyes. She didn't expect such an outstanding child to come to her place in the middle of the night. "Young master, are you lonely at night and come to our drunken joy house to have fun?" Shengguan Yu did not answer. The old mother was also a sharp-eyed person. Just by looking at his outstanding temperament and expensive clothes, she knew that he was definitely a young master of an aristocratic family. "Qiu Yan is a new girl that our drunken joy brothel has recruited. To be honest, she has not been married yet. 3 days later, we are planning to auction her. Since young master is here, then I'll make the decision on my own and let this girl serve you first. How about it?" Shengguan Yu did not refuse, but took out a large ingot of silver from his sleeve and gave it to her. When the old mother saw that he was so generous, she was glad that she was right. She happily took the silver and said, "Young master, please come with me." I will lead you to your room. Shang Guanyu followed her upstairs. The lively and fragrant room was filled with an ambiguous atmosphere. Even the incense stimulated the body's most instinctive desire. Red curtains, red bed, it was an alluring fragrance. Shang Guanyu didn't know why he was here. As long as he thought of what Shuang Shi had said to him today, he couldn't catch his breath. The suffocating pain seemed to dissipate a lot as he entered the room. Chapter 240. Soon, the door was pushed open, and a beautiful woman shyly walked in. She was dressed in a pink gauze, and her thin waist could be grasped by a single hand. If a large hand exerted force, it would be easily crushed. Her lips were red, her teeth were white, and her eyebrows were arched like willow leaves. Especially that pink little mouth, it could simply be described as tender and alluring. Compared with the arrogant and domineering Shin Yueji, she seemed to be full of the unique charm of a woman. Young master, she thought her mother was lying to her, saying that it was a handsome young man. She didn't believe it and refused to come. However, she didn't expect that the young master in front of her was really as handsome as a celestial being. Her heart was beating fast. The women who came here to serve the guests were not chosen by her, but it was her first time after all. Which woman didn't want to give her first time to a man she liked? If she could give her first night to him. Qiu Yan thought of what was about to happen and her face turned red. She hurriedly walked to the tea table and poured 2 cups of wine. Then, she leisurely walked towards the handsome young man sitting on the bed. Young master, I'm Qiu Yan. Here's a toast to you. Shang Guanyu didn't need to look down to know that there was something in the wine. All the guests who came here knew what would happen when they entered this room, so every place in this room was prepared for the guests. Shang Guanyu stared at her for a long time without hiding his eyes. Qiu Yan blushed and lowered her head, trying to make herself say something bold. Young master, don't worry. Later on the bed, I'll let you see enough. Such bold words made Shang Guanyu's eyes dim. He took the wine from her white fingers and drank it in one gulp. Seeing that he had drunk the wine, Qiu Yan also drank the wine in one gulp. She put down the wine cup and slowly moved her body along the man's thigh. A pair of warm hands slowly moved up from his thigh. Young master, let me serve you from now on. Shang Guanyu did not move, nor did he resist. He just let her hold him, let her hands casually fan the flames on his body, like a statue. Maybe this was what Shin Yueji wanted. Perhaps this was the kind of life he should have. He should learn from other men and have 3 wives and 4 concubines. After he had enough of the life in the mansion, he would come to the brothel to seek pleasure and repeat the cycle. His heart turned cold as he allowed the woman to touch him all over. She wrapped her body around him like a loach, and her soft little hands went through his clothes, slithering into his body and climbing up his masculinity. He was startled. Qiu Yan blushed and pushed the man onto the bed. She took off her clothes. The outer cover was just a symbol of pretense and modesty, but she was really not wearing a single inch inside. The young girl's delicate body was as exquisite as a pearl. Any man who saw her would probably be unable to restrain himself. However, Shang Guanyu's eyes were as calm as still water. Even the thing in Qiu Yan's hand did not seem to be moved by her at all. She was unwilling to give up. Her almond-shaped eyes were filled with tears. Young master, do you think that I feel that I can't make you feel comfortable? Shang Guanyu gently raised his hand and gently wiped away the tears at the corner of her eyes. He turned over and pressed her under his body. Qiu Yan couldn't hide the joy on her face. She hurriedly took off his clothes. His robe was easily taken off by her. Shang Guanyu looked down at her delicate mouth, and his Adam's apple moved slightly. Chapter 241. Compared with the concubines and wives of the so-called manors, they were indeed not as bold as the women in the brothel. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many men who would abandon their beautiful wives and family members at home and still come to the brothel to seek pleasure. It was all because they would never be able to experience what it meant to be truly seductive when it came to their own women. They would rather die than live. Shang Guanyu stared at the girl's fragrant lips in a daze. However, at the moment when her lips were about to touch his, the unfamiliar woman's breath and Shin Yueji's arrogant and domineering face appeared in his mind. Bursts of nausea made him turn his head away and throw the woman out of the bed. Bang! A loud sound rang out. Qiu Yan's delicate body fell to the ground with a muffled groan. Her fair and tender body immediately turned red when she fell to the ground. She immediately burst into tears because of the pain. Puzzled and distressed, she looked at the indifferent man who was elegantly dressing himself on the bed. His every movement revealed a noble demeanor. Young master. Why? She felt so wrong that tears rolled down her cheeks one after another. Shang Guanyu did not look at her. He just took her clothes and put them on her. Then, he took out a large ingot of silver from the elegant robe and gave it to her. Before leaving, he only said, "You are not her." Walking out of the Drunken Joy building, Shang Guanyu did not look back again. In the cold wind and the dark night, he seemed to have recovered some of his senses as the cold wind blew on his face. There was a trace of indelible coldness on his warm thin lips, and even his dark eyes were like owls. Shin Yueji's beautiful face appeared in front of him again. Shang Guanyu laughed at himself. Do you know? Apart from you, I don't have the slightest interest in other women. How can I marry someone else? Even though he had forced himself to touch that woman just now, from the moment that woman entered the room, or from the moment he saw the words Drunken Joy House, his heart was already very conflicted. Especially when that woman boldly leaned her body against his leg, he wanted to kill her, but he still endured it. He endured it with great difficulty, not even daring to move, because he was afraid that if he moved even the slightest bit, in the next second, the one lying on the ground would be a cold corpse. He sighed silently, raised his head, and looked at the cold moon hanging high in the sky. You've always disliked weak men. I've always been working hard to make myself stronger. I gave up my studies for martial arts. No matter how much suffering I've endured, as long as I think about being able to protect you in the future and stand by your side, I feel that everything I've done is worth it. But you never gave me a chance, not even now. Now, he just wanted to silently guard and protect her. Even if he could not get a response from her, he was willing to do so, but she even wanted to take back this little bit. General's mansion. Compared to the coldness of the night, the general's mansion at this moment was bustling, as usual. Mo Wushang sat on the main seat, and on his right sat old General Shin Shin, whose face was red from drinking. Chapter 242. The servants who understood Mo Wushang's character were so scared that they didn't even dare to breathe. They all lowered their heads and didn't dare to speak. Only Shin Yueji sat in the corner and listened to Shin He's nonsense. Her mouth twitched. She and Mo Wushang didn't even have anything to do with each other. This Shin He was too quick to hug her thighs. He was already addressing her as son-in-law. The key point was that the man seemed to enjoy this title very much and was willing to be taken advantage of. The cold aura around his body had long since disappeared like the cold moon. He took the wine that Shin He handed him and drank it in one gulp. He looked like a good son-in-law who was obedient and attentive. Shin Yueji's eyes hurt. She closed her eyes and ate her food, treating them as air. Shin Yueji had been back for a long time. He was travel-worn. Before he could talk to his dear little sister about the pain of lovesickness, he was dragged to eat by the servants of the residence, saying that the Prince Regent was here. He bit his chopsticks and stuffed rice into his mouth. From time to time, he looked up at Shin Yueji with tears in his eyes. He had been away from home for 4 to 5 days. Not only did his parents not like him, they even asked him why he came back so quickly. Even his little sister, her heart was hooked by a certain prince regent and she didn't even look at him. Feeling Shin Yueji's gaze, Shin Yueji looked up and glanced in his direction. Shin Yueji was so excited that he immediately put a big piece of chicken leg in her arms and grinned at her. Shin Yueji, she stuffed the chicken leg in the bowl back to him in disgust. Shin Yueji was overwhelmed by the favor. He immediately stuffed the drumstick into his mouth and chewed it. Sob sob, his little sister really loved him too much. He knew. He knew that she didn't forget to stuff him with a chicken leg when he was tired from being away for 4 to 5 days. Feeling another sharp gaze on her head, Shin Yueji didn't dare to eat quietly. She silently picked up a piece of vegetable and put it into Mo Wushang's bowl from a distance. Mo Wushang had been toasting with Shin He since he came to the table. He drank a few mouthfuls of wine but didn't eat a bite. Seeing Shin Yueji put food in his bowl, he reluctantly moved his chopsticks. He ate the food she put in his bowl. Shin Yueji was very excited. Moreover, he was her little sister's first love. Look at this treatment. She only gave him meat and vegetables, he. The grievances he had suffered upon returning to the residence immediately vanished into thin air. He recalled what Ji Chu had told him before. Ever since she died, she had only been drinking and had not eaten anything. That pale, lonely, and cold face indeed looked much thinner than when they had first met. Shin Yueji's heart skipped a beat. She picked up more food for him with her chopsticks. Don't just drink. Eat more. Mo Wushang obediently ate all the food that she picked up with her chopsticks, leaving only the rice in his bowl untouched. Why are you only eating vegetables? The man's gaze shifted to her half-eaten bowl. There were still a lot of leftovers left. She didn't look like she had any appetite, but the man's gaze was fixed on her. I want to eat your bowl. Without waiting for Shin Yueji to react, Mother Shen and Father Shen happily took the bowl of rice in front of Shin Yueji and placed it in front of Mo Wushang. Chapter 243. Shin Yueji wiped the cold sweat off her forehead. She couldn't bear to look at the leftovers she had eaten. Since Mo Wushang didn't mind, she would just let him eat until he died. But Shen He's way of addressing him, Father. What kind of position do you place the emperor in? She silently picked a few pieces of meat into Mo Wushang's bowl and a few pieces of vegetables, taking away the rice that he hadn't touched. Shin Yueji didn't look at the man's expression and focused on eating. Wu Su looked up and saw Mo Wushang eating with relish in her bowl as if it was a delicious delicacy. She, on the other hand, was eating the rice in her bowl as if it was tasteless. Shin Yueji put another big piece of fat meat into her bowl. Shin Yueji almost vomited when she saw the oily and fishy piece of meat. She didn't say anything and returned the meat to him. Shin Yueji happily nibbled on the fat meat and smiled foolishly. His little sister really doted on him. Shin Yueji felt awkward and depressed during the meal. When she was finally full, she wanted to find an excuse to run away. Your mother has ordered the maids to tidy up your room after you left. Since the regent rarely comes, he will sleep in the same room as you. Father Shen said. Shin Yueji wanted to cry but had no tears. Father, I am the imperial consort. Father Shen took a bite of the chicken leg and mumbled, Father knows, Father knows. But the regent is not the emperor. It's the same, it's the same. What's the same? She continued to cry. It's my son-in-law. Equals. Shin Yueji stood up from her seat with her head lowered. She caught Mo Wushang's gaze and saw a smile in his dark and cold eyes. But she glared back at him fiercely. He immediately stopped smiling and continued to eat, as if the scene just now was an illusion of Shen Yueji's. Seeing his little sister leave, Shen Yueji ate a few mouthfuls and put down his chopsticks. "Father, Mother, I'm full too. I'm leaving." It was so quiet that no one paid attention to him. He looked at his parents attentively warming up the man sitting on the main seat. He gritted his teeth and said in grief, "Father, Mother." Mother Shen turned around and glared at him. "If you want to leave, then leave. What are you yelling about? Don't you see your brother-in-law here?" Shen Yueji was speechless. "That's my brother-in-law, okay?" Seeing what he was thinking, Mother Shen glared at him. "How can the regent be a concubine? From tomorrow onwards, Ji will be your elder sister." "Shen Yueji, it's rare for the regent to visit the general's mansion. It just so happens that Ji won't be returning to the palace these few days. You must stay in the mansion for a few more days. Otherwise, Ji will be bored alone." Mother Shen smiled. "Yes, this old man only has one daughter. I am very gratified to hear Double Happiness talk about the regent and Ji's glorious deeds in the palace." The Shen father happily takes a big gulp of wine. Mo Wushang's handsome face became a little absent-minded after Shen Yueji left. He returned to his previous indifferent look. He indifferently pushed away the wine cup that Shen He pushed towards him. "I heard that Ji and the eldest young master of the Shangwan family went out to play today. There's no such thing, there's no such thing. It's just a coincidence. Yu's father and this official have been old friends for many years. Since he's here, this official has to do his best as a host. This official has asked Double Happiness to prepare the money in advance. We're waiting for the future to clear our relationship. Regent, please don't misunderstand." The Shen father hurriedly explained. Shen Yueji listened to them with a headache. After waiting for a long time, knowing that his two parents would not pay attention to him, he left with a sad face. Before he left, he accidentally bumped into a stool and made a loud noise. He didn't even have time to cry out in pain. Chapter 244. Qilan Courtyard was Shen Yueji's residence. After Shen Yueji left the dinner table, she went straight to his residence. She thought that after Shen Yueji came back, he would arrange for Li Yingying to stay with him. In the end, she turned the entire Qilan Courtyard upside down and didn't even miss the bottom of the bed. Not to mention Li Yingying's shadow, there wasn't even a hair of a woman. She randomly caught a maid from Qilan Courtyard and found out that Li Yingying wasn't arranged to stay here at all. Shen Yueji let out a long breath. She didn't know if it was because of anger or something else. She sat on the bed panting. She should have known Shen Yueji's character. He never played his cards according to the rules, but she still foolishly came here to look for him. Double Happiness. "Hey, Mississippi," Double Happiness came in with a burp. Shen Yueji squinted at her. "According to your understanding of Big Brother, where do you think he will arrange for Li Yingying?" "The woodshed, the little dark room, any scary place is possible." Double Happiness answered without thinking. Shen Yueji, after a long time, she moved her lips and spat out two words, "The reason." "Think about it, Mississippi. You originally gave young master a deadline of about 3 days. Young master wants to please you so much. As long as he can make it in time, he will definitely rush back. However, he dragged on for 4 to 5 days on the road. This must be Li Yingying's doing. She must have played some tricks on the road. Otherwise, young master wouldn't have come back so late. Any woman other than Miss, as long as they offend young master is very vengeful. He must have locked Li Yingying in the little dark room. Shinyueji. Somehow, she felt that what Double Happiness said made sense. In our general's residence, which place is the blackest? The scariest? Double Happiness scratched her head and thought seriously for a while. It seems to be in young master's backyard. Backyard? Shinyueji's mouth twitched. She didn't ask Double Happiness for the reason. Instead, she got up and walked towards the backyard of Qilon Courtyard. As the name suggested, she didn't know much about Shinyueji's backyard in her memory. When they really entered the backyard of Qilon Courtyard, 3 black lines appeared on Shinyueji's head. How was this a backyard? This was clearly a shady inn. It was one thing for other people to have flowers and trees in their backyard, but he had snakes in his backyard. Not only that, he had black rats and big spiders running all over the place. Taking a symbolic step back, Shinyueji thought of a certain woman who was likely to be locked up here, and her face completely darkened. Did she not kill her on the way here, so she brought her back to scare her to death? Miss, don't be afraid. These little bastards have memories. You are their master, they won't hurt you. Seeing her step back, Shuangxi thought that since she hadn't been back for so long, Miss had forgotten about these strange things. Hearing this, Shinyueji looked at her gloomily. Although eldest young master raised these things well, eldest young master raised them for you, young Mississippi. He's just waiting for someone to bully young Mississippi. He'll throw a snake, a rat, and a spider into their house to scare them. She walked past the little fellows who took the initiative to make way for her. They were densely packed and filled the entire garden. Shinyueji walked inside. Let's go find Miss Li first. Chapter 245. This was indeed a good and powerful way to take revenge. But when Shinyueji went to open the door, she found a room full of green, black, and yellow snakes. They formed a circle and were sticking out their tongues at her. When she was alive, she was afraid of snakes. After experiencing so many things after death, she was less afraid of snakes. But seeing so many snakes coming out at once, her heart still beat with fear. Almost instinctively, she retreated. With the previous example, Shinyueji didn't rush to open the other doors. Instead, she chose a distance and opened it slowly. When she saw a group of black spiders coming out of the room, she hurriedly closed the door and stopped them from coming out. In another room, she took a deep breath and opened the door a little. Sure enough, a group of rats was already waiting in the room. They were just waiting for her to open the door so that they could rush out. Shinyueji felt like she was going crazy. She knew that Shinyueji was a weirdo, but she didn't expect her to be this weird. She raised a bunch of disgusting things. Her face was a little pale. I've searched all the rooms. Where are Li Yingying and the others? Also, snakes were cold-blooded animals. Among the snakes, many of them were much longer than her height. Double Happiness said that they recognized her as their master. During the period when she was here, they avoided her. But Li Yingying was different. She was a stranger to them. This Shinyueji was too ridiculous, she was treated like this. Those daughters of aristocratic families were delicate and not her. Even if it was her previous self, she would have been scared to death. Double Happiness saw that she didn't look good and quickly pulled her hand. Miss, please follow me. I should know where they are. Double Happiness pulled her all the way forward and finally stopped under a big tree. Miss, it should be here. There was nothing but a big tree. Shinyueji squinted and looked up and down. Here. Miss, look. Double Happiness pointed at a flat and smooth piece of land. She stepped forward and kicked it a few times, making a muffled sound. Almost as soon as she pulled her foot back, she heard a hoarse cry that revealed a strong sense of fear. Is anyone there? Help, hurry up and save me. Sob sob. Hearing this, Shin Yueji did not dare to hesitate any longer. She quickly bent down and lifted the layer of things on top. It was a small hole that was neither too big nor too small. After the top was lifted, it could be clearly seen that in the small pit, there were two shivering little bodies hugging each other. As for the little servant girl who was screaming hysterically, her face was deathly pale and her cheeks were covered with hot tears. Her pale little face was even more terrifying than a dead person. Shin Yueji did not say anything else. She only ordered double happiness to get someone to pull them out. Shuang she pulled with some difficulty. Almost as soon as she got up, she saw the maidservant put her hands on her waist, pointed at Shin Yueji's nose and scolded, "What's wrong with you? Is this how you treat my young miss by inviting her over? To think that you're from a prestigious family. Quickly apologize to my young miss." Shin Yueji frowned in the face of the little servant girl's anger. This servant girl had no manners at all. She couldn't even tell who was who. Chapter 246. Xiao Yu. Liang Ying's pale lips were bloodless. She watched as Xiao Yu's thin body, like a kite with a broken string, fell uncontrollably into the deep pit. Then she saw a bunch of strange things crawling towards her direction. She screamed in fear and covered her face, "Don't come over, don't come over." This was the first time Shin Yueji saw Liang Ying's appearance after so long. She had heard of it before, but she had never seen it. It could be said that this was the first time. Her lips were red and her teeth were white. Her figure was slender. She was dressed in white like a fairy. Her pale cheeks and familiar contours were very similar to her previous self. Even if she were to stand here in person, she would only need to dress up a little and dress up according to her past self, and she would at least be 90% identical. She shed tears. "Why do you treat me so cruelly? If you didn't sincerely invite me to the palace, why do you have to tease me like this? I have never offended you. Xiao Yu has been with me since she was a child. We are like sisters. How can you treat her like this? Quickly pull her up. How dare you yell at the imperial concubine and insult her? Liang Ying, this maidservant of yours is not small." "What did you say?" Liang Ying's eyes widened at Shin Yueji's words. She stared at Shin Yueji for a long time. She suddenly bowed down and kowtowed. "This servant's daughter has eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai. I have offended the imperial concubine. I hope the imperial concubine will forgive me." Whether it was Xiao Yu or herself, they didn't expect that Shin Yueji, who was far away in the palace, would suddenly appear in the general's mansion. Otherwise, Xiao Yu would not dare to speak so presumptuously. Shin Yueji glanced at her indifferently and withdrew her gaze. "Double happiness, pull her out. Take Miss Lee to freshen up and then come see me." "Yes, Mississippi." Sitting on Shin Yueji's bed, Shin Yueji frowned. In fact, the courtyard next to Shin Yueji's was her residence. The reason why her residence was so close to Shin Yueji's was because she cried and tried to hang herself 3 times. Shin Yueji went to her courtyard to look for her, but he couldn't find her. In the end, he was told that his little sister went to his residence, which made him very happy. When he saw Shin Yueji sitting in the room with a cold face, his smile froze on his face, like a child who had done something wrong. After hesitating outside the door for a while, he slowly walked towards her. Big brother went to the Central Plains and should have returned in 3 days. Why did he only return after 5 days? As soon as Shin Yueji saw him, she asked straightforwardly. Shin Yueji sat down beside her. "It's all that Li Yingying's fault. She kept coming back and forth, saying that she couldn't get used to Jinzhou's steamed buns and that she had a serious illness due to the poor climate. She asked me to get a doctor to treat her, but that wasn't all. Whenever she wasn't satisfied with anything, she would start crying, as if I was the one who bullied her. If it weren't for you, I would have already left in shame. I don't care if she's dead or alive. Do you know how much I've suffered these past few days? Speaking of his grievances, Shinjuechi couldn't help but cry. He tugged at Shinjuechi's sleeve with a bashful face, and winked at her. Little sister, how are you going to make it up to me? Chapter 247. I didn't scare them. I just wanted to teach them a lesson. Li Yingying and the others are women, and they are delicate ladies. Shinjuechi held her forehead and said, do you know that you almost scared them to death? Shinjuechi snorted and said, I left the capital for nearly 5 days for my little sister, and I suffered from lovesickness every day. But my little sister scolded you as soon as she came back. She didn't care about the grievances you suffered these days, but cared about others. Shinjuechi looked at him speechlessly and got up to leave. Little sister, you really don't love me anymore. However, as soon as she took a step, her leg was hugged. Shinjuechi's mouth twitched as she looked at the man who was lying on the ground and crying while hugging her leg without caring about his image. What are you doing? You flirted with the Prince Regent to drive away the cold and warm him up. You even gave him food and he ate your rice. You can't do this. I feel so sorry for you. You didn't even let me eat your leftovers. Shinjuechi rolled her eyes speechlessly and stretched out her foot to kick him. He didn't move. She looked down at him and said, do you mean that letting you eat leftovers is for your own good? Shinjuechi nodded wildly. Go away. With a fierce kick, Shinjuechi's body became so weak that he rolled on the ground. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw that the little figure had walked away without any intention of helping him up. He rolled back, hugged her leg, and continued to cry, didn't you see that I've lost weight because I missed you? Why are you so heartless? You didn't talk to me for a while and went to find someone else. Shinjuechi seriously realized that she shouldn't have waited for him to come back and asked about Li Yingying's behavior along the way. If she had known that Shinjuechi was so difficult, she would have gone back directly after finding him. I still have something to say to Li Yingying. Brother, are you deliberately embarrassing me by hugging me like this? Hearing this, Shinjuechi quickly let go of her and got up from the ground. I'll go with my little sister. I'll let you see how annoying Li Yingying is. Shinjuechi only glanced at him and said nothing. In front of Shinjuechi, she had an ulterior motive, which was why she acted like that. However, in front of Shinjuechi, she didn't dare to do so. Thinking of this, Shinjuechi had another headache. How was her brother going to get a wife in the future? Jilan Courtyard and Qilan Courtyard were both named after them. Shinjuechi was reluctant when she found out that her residence was named after such a place. Miss, this servant has taken care of them. Double Happiness came out and greeted Shinjuechi respectfully when he saw her. Little Joy. As soon as Shinjuechi saw her, she immediately shouted. Hearing this familiar voice and address, Shuangshi instantly burst into tears. Young master. The two of them opened their arms and ran toward each other. They looked like lovers who had only seen each other once in a few hundred years. Shinjuechi's mouth twitched as she stood between them. Who would have thought that the two of them would let her go, one on the left and one on the right, and embrace each other tightly? Shinjuechi. Ignoring the two of them, Shinjuechi stepped into the room. Young master, I haven't seen you in a few months. You've lost a lot of weight. Chapter 248. That's right. The food in the palace is good and the clothes are warm. I've gained a few kilograms. That's good. I'm glad that you look better when you're chubbier. Eldest young master is the same. When you slim down, you look handsome and suave. Is that so? I'll eat less in the future and try my best to slim down. Eldest young master, you have to take care of your health while eating less. Don't let Madam and the General force you to eat like you used to. Li Yingying, who was sitting on a round chair, poured tea for her. Shen Yueji's mind was completely attracted by the chatter of the two people outside. Wu Su recovered from his daze and looked at the delicate Li Yingying before him. I heard that Miss Li has been making things difficult for my big brother on the way here. Li Yingying's face turned pale. Xiaoyu, who was standing beside her, hurriedly said, Your Highness, it's not what you think. It's just that this is the first time Miss Li has traveled far. Miss Li has a kind heart. When she was bullied in the residence, it was all thanks to the care of the old couple in the Zhong province. Miss Li is just afraid. She's worried about the safety of others when she can't even protect herself. That's kind-hearted. Shen Yueji's lips curled into a faint smile. Li Yingying bit her lower lip when she heard the meaning behind Shen Yueji's words. Tears welled up in her eyes. As Shen Yueji put down the teacup in her hand, her tears were forced back. As a fellow woman, this consort believes that I can see through Miss Li's thoughts. It was true that all men liked weak and sickly women. This would give rise to a desire to protect them. But, she sneered, the general's residence is a family of generals. Isn't it a waste to use those weak and scheming women on us? Moreover, speaking to this point, she elegantly and slowly took a sip of tea. Eldest brother has always been stupid when it comes to matters of the heart. He also doesn't like delicate girls like Miss Li. I'm afraid that Miss Li's intentions have been used on the wrong person. In just a few words, she had seen through the thoughts in her heart. Li Yingying's pale face regained some color. She knelt on the ground. Many thanks for Guifei's reminder. This subject will definitely not have such thoughts in the future. No, you still have to think about it, but don't put it on my general's mansion. Compared to the general's mansion, Miss Li seems to only know that I called you into the palace because I lack a servant girl. But why don't you think about it? I don't know you at all, so why did I specifically ask you to come into the palace to serve me? Your Highness. Compared to the general's mansion, don't you think that the imperial palace is where you belong? Looking at Li Yingying's shocked and unbelievable face, she probably couldn't imagine that in this world, there was actually someone who was willing to send a woman to fight for her man's favor. Based on Shen Yueji's appearance, she was a woman who could tempt any woman. She didn't need to, although Li Yingying had thought about this before, she quickly rejected it. She didn't expect that her previous guess was actually true. Chapter 249. Shen Yueji put her hand on the tea table and tapped it lightly. Miss Li's mind is no less than that of others. In this harem, with my protection, you will go far in the future. Moreover, compared to those illustrious and outstanding concubines in the inner palace, this consort feels that your outstanding point is that you have a face that is 90% similar to the late empress. Li Yingying's hand gently touched her face. This official's daughter has also often heard people say that this official's daughter's face is very similar to the late empress's. However, ever since the late empress died, father doesn't allow this official's daughter to go out. He's afraid that this face will bring trouble to this official's daughter and the Fu. The late empress was drowned in the lake because she had an affair. Then the emperor blocked all the news about her and forbade anyone to mention her. If her face, Li Yingying was worried. This consort didn't summon you here to send you to your death. If this consort really wanted to find someone to be a scapegoat, it wouldn't be worthwhile to find someone completely unrelated to this. Putting down the teacup in her hand, Shen Yueji glanced at her lightly. Don't worry about this. My means are not so despicable. Your Highness. Xiaoyu is my trusted maid. After entering the palace, can I? Shin Yueji laughed involuntarily. Li Yingying was puzzled. You have taken the initiative to bring her here. Now you ask me whether I can bring her into the palace. Yes, you can, but you have to enter the palace in the name of my general's mansion. After entering the palace, this maid can only serve me. Li Yingying was delighted when she heard this. She and Xiaoyu hurriedly kowtowed to express their gratitude. Thank you, Your Highness. We will serve you faithfully and never have second thoughts. Shuangxi. Hearing someone calling her inside, Shuangxi wiped her red and swollen tears. First, young master, Miss is calling me. I'll go in first. Shin Yueqi also wiped her tears. Well, go ahead. Hearing the footsteps, Shin Yueji raised her eyes and glanced at her lightly. When she saw her red and swollen eyes, she couldn't help feeling a headache. She tentatively said, Did I break up your reunion just now? No, miss. Why did you call the servant? Shuangxi rubbed his eyes and said. Prepare a place for Miss Li and her servant. Yes, miss. Shuangxi glanced at them and thought of eldest young master's complaints. She cursed them in her heart and resisted the urge to throw them into eldest young master's backyard again. She led them to her young Mrs. backyard. After Shin Yueqi came in, she picked a place closest to her and sat down. As soon as he sat down, Shin Yueji's faint voice came from beside him. Is Big Brother interested in double happiness? What? Shin Yueqi jumped up in fright. What did you say? Nothing. Shin Yueji shrugged her shoulders and said, I saw the two of you hugging each other just now, as if I was the one who broke you up. I'm just curious. Shin Yueqi said angrily, There is no woman in the world who is worthy of me. I am as beautiful as a flower, how can that girl Shuangxi covet me? Sister, you don't know. Little Cici and I, on a stormy night, put 3 incense sticks in front of the grave and became sworn brothers. She is now my brother. Chapter 250. Oh, right. Why are Li Yingying and her servants so obedient? When he came in, he met them face to face, but none of them dared to look at him. One of them, he didn't know whether she was a servant or a master, peeked at him. The fear in her eyes made it seem as if he could eat them. We are going to the palace. How can we not be obedient? Is there anything else? Little sister, what do you mean? Shin Yueji took a sip of tea and glanced at him. What do I mean? The Prince Regent will come over later. What's the point of you staying here? Shin Yueji sneered. Then he thought of what Mother Shin said to him before he left. He was very depressed and shrugged his head. Our mother said that you will be my sister in the future. Puff, a mouthful of tea sprayed out in front of him, right on his face. Shin Yueji wiped the water stains on his face with his sleeve without any disgust. Are you excited? Shin Yueji looked at him with a dark face, speechless. Why? She said that the regent can't be called a concubine. If you two get together in the future, I can't call him brother-in-law, but brother-in-law. Shin Yueji rolled her eyes at him. Since he can't be called a concubine, won't father and mother be his father-in-law and mother-in-law? It's not the same. They have to take advantage of father and mother. They raised our daughter just for this day. He could roughly understand Shin Yueji's words. Shin Yueji's position in the family was really indescribable. It was said that the status of a general's son was second only to the old general. But when it came to the Shin family, Shin Yueji found that she was the first, followed by her mother, then Father Shin, and then double happiness, the old nanny in the mansion, the servant girl. At the end of the line, it seemed that Shin Yueji's turn. Big brother, don't you have any thoughts? Shin Yueji sobbed. What thoughts can I have? As long as you don't feel wronged, I don't care what you want. But I don't understand one thing. What? Previously, the Prince Regent ignored you. Why did he suddenly treat you so well after you entered the palace? I'm worried. Worried about what? Seeing that she was still calmly sipping her tea, Shen Yueqi sometimes felt that this calm and composed woman sitting in front of him didn't seem like his weird little sister. Shen Yueqi was used to being impetuous, and it was rare for him to see her so calm. He sighed. Can't you see what I'm worried about? Back then, the Prince Regent and the late Empress were so close and devoted. In the end, the late Empress was sentenced to death by the Emperor, and he was nowhere to be found. The people in the palace and the capital all said that he was deeply in love with the late Empress. But how long have you been in the palace? Look at him. Does Big Brother suspect that he has ulterior motives towards me? After drinking the tea in the teacup, Shen Yueqi smiled slightly. The regent's status is equal to that of the emperor. Even if he treats me well because he is using me, what can we do? Once a subject, he will always be a subject. Whatever the emperor wants him to do, the subject has no choice but to do. Since she said so, according to Shen Yueqi's intelligence and wisdom, he should be able to figure it out. However, Shen Yueqi heard the sound of sniffling. Looking over, she saw that the tall and handsome man was pulling her sleeve and wiping the snot and tears on her face. Chapter 251. Resisting the urge to hit someone, Shen Yueqi took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and tried hard to calm the raging waves in her heart. Little sister, sob. Don't worry, your brother and father won't let you suffer any grievances. Our father has secretly trained a lot of useful people. If Mo Wushang dares to bully you or use you, I'll let our father put all these people in the Prince Regent's mansion and empty his mansion. It took a great deal of effort for her to pull her sleeve out from his demonic claws. Looking at the ruined sleeve, Shen Yueqi's black eyes suddenly lit up. She suppressed her anger and said, Brother, it's getting late. You should go back. Shen Yueqi squatted at her feet and said, let me sleep under the bed. If Mo Wushang comes later and dares to touch you, I'll pretend to be a ghost under the bed to scare him. Shen Yueqi's face twitched. She slammed the tea table and finally blurted out the words that were on the tip of her tongue, Get out of here. After driving Shen Yueqi away, Shen Yueqi looked at the night outside and walked to the window alone. The hazy moonlight revealed a gloomy chill. In the middle of the night, there were some insects chirping in the courtyard from time to time. Just thinking about that man made her upset. The affairs of the country, the people, the country, and women. He chose the first three without hesitation. She didn't know what he was going to do when he left the palace. What couldn't he order his servants to do? He was already the supreme emperor of the Feng country. Everything in the Feng country belonged to him. What other treasures did he have to go out of the palace to find? Feng Zhouqing, there was a strong sense of uneasiness in her heart. She raised her head and looked at the cold moon. She let out a sigh filled with self-mockery. Have I understood you too little over the past 9 years? I thought I knew everything about you, but in the end, it was just a drop in the bucket. Kongyin Temple the man was dressed in white, and it was difficult to conceal his peerless elegance. However, at this moment, his face was as pale as snow. Qiu Yang anxiously looked at the blood flowing out from his wrist. 2 hours, almost 2 hours, the blood flowed out. The small pool in front of him was almost full of his master's blood. It was dazzling and shocking. Many times, he wanted to step forward and stop this fatal move of his, but every time he saw his pale and pained face, he stopped in his tracks. Why did Master have to do this? Others only knew that he loved the country and the world. However, only he knew that in his master's heart, there was a person who was higher than the country and the common people. Someone who could make him risk his life and nourish her with his own flesh and blood. Master Kong Yin. Master has been busy with the state affairs these days. His health is no longer what it used to be. If he, unable to bear to see Feng Jiuqing in such a state, Qiu Yang stepped forward and reminded the old monk anxiously. Kong Yin Temple was a temple far away from the capital. There weren't many people who came here. In total, there was only Kong Yin and a little monk who cleaned the temple. There was no third person. It was said that Master Kong Yin could understand the heavens and the earth. When he found him, he obviously didn't believe it. However, the emperor talked to him in private. From then on, no matter what Kong Yin asked the emperor to do, the emperor would do it. Chapter 252. Master. Everything has its cause and effect. If you don't use your blood as compensation, how can you ensure that the woman's body won't rot? But Master is the monarch of a country after all. He has used up almost half of his blood in just a month. He hasn't recovered enough yet, but he has to donate blood again. Master Kong Yin, this is harmful to His Majesty's body. Kong Yin shook his head and sighed. I'm just following Master's wishes. The water in the pool was black. With the addition of the red blood, the color of the pool became darker. Qiu Yang didn't know why Kong Yin would ask his master to use his blood to fill up this small pool every time the emperor came here. He wanted to ask many times, but his master didn't say anything, so he didn't ask. Sometimes, he even suspected that Kong Yin was pretending to be mysterious and was a fake monk. But when he knew that the corpse of the person in the imperial study was still alive after a few months, only then did he believe that Kong Yin really had the ability to do so. But why couldn't he just say it directly? Why did he have to ask his master to come here once a month and donate half of his blood? And his master didn't refuse every time. Seeing the long wound on his master's wrist and the blood flowing out, Qiu Yang felt a suffocating pain in his heart. Why did his master have to do this? When the time was up, Qiu Yang didn't dare to hesitate. He quickly found some gauze to stop the emperor's wound. Your Majesty, do you feel any discomfort? Standing in front of Feng Jiuqing, he looked at Kong Yin and smiled. Master, thank you. The most difficult thing for a man in the world is his own love. Benefactor, since you have love in your heart, why do you have to go through so much trouble and scheme? The man's straight body trembled. His hands under the brocade robe were trembling. In the end, he didn't say anything and just turned around. After a long time, his hoarse voice was heard slowly. I'm in a high position. Everything is beyond my control. If he wasn't the emperor of Feng country, he would have no desire. He would stay by her side wholeheartedly and accompany her to travel the world. They would be a couple that everyone envied. I hate men who are infatuated the most. Benefactor, I'm afraid that when the person you are looking forward to wakes up in the future, his soul will be separated from his body. Master. Feng Jiuqing turned to look at him. Great Master Kong Yin shook his head and stopped there. I've already ordered Ling to arrange a room for you. 2 benefactors, please follow me. Every word that Grandmaster Kong Yin said was full of meaning. Feng Jiuqing wanted to continue asking, but he knew that he would offend him. Grandmaster Kong Yin had always stopped short of saying too much. His handsome face paled even more as he thought about the girl he had carefully protected in the secret room. She was only sleeping, and one day, she would wake up. But the master told him that while the body was present, the soul had left. Your Majesty, this subordinate will escort you to the side room to rest. He felt that he had always been cautious and meticulous, and he would never make a mistake. Feng Jiuqing restrained the faint uneasiness and suspicion on the tip of his brows, and he glanced at Kong Yin's departing figure before his vision went black and he collapsed. Emperor. Qiu Yang was shocked. he quickly supported him and carried him to the room. Chapter 253. Under Master's gentle jade-like appearance, only the scene in front of her was the real him. Fragile, lonely, thin, yearning, pain, Chiao-yang sighed, turned around, and left. The moment the door was closed, the man lying on the bed suddenly opened his eyes. His sharp eyes were dyed with a thick layer of black. He narrowed his eyes and his gaze fell on his bandaged wrist. His warm and moist lips curled into a cold-blooded smile. In the wing room, Kong Yin was wearing a monk's robe, kneeling in front of the Buddha statue. Hearing the movement behind him, he closed his eyes and said, "Amitabha. Your Majesty has always been scheming. Under your gentle appearance, sometimes even this old monk can't tell if you're just putting on a show or if you're really deeply in love." Feng Jiuqing walked to his side and sat down. Looking at the Buddha statue, he suddenly smiled. When Master Kong Yin was young, there was no place for him to put his skills to use. That's why he became a monk after being dispirited. Hearing this, Kong Yin opened his eyes. This old monk has been accompanying the Buddha in Kong Yin Temple for nearly 20 years. My mind has long been polished by the Buddha. The only thing I'm unwilling to do is to waste my skills. But Your Majesty, you even have to be wary of your trusted guards who have followed you for so many years. May I ask, in the future, if this old monk is really loyal to Your Majesty, will Your Majesty also be wary of this old monk like Chiao-yang? Speaking of this, he smiled again. The Gu family is loyal to Your Majesty, but now Your Majesty wants to get rid of them. Even the Shen family, who have always been loyal to Your Majesty, wants to take back the military power of the Shen family. The Gu family has indeed been kind to me, but I let them hurt my wife. When hearing him mention his wife, Kong Yin suddenly narrowed his eyes. Your Majesty has repeatedly shown in front of everyone that you are deeply in love with the late Empress and that you miss her like a servant, causing others to mistakenly think that you are still deeply in love with the late Empress. Was the Emperor deliberately acting like this for Shen Guifei to see? Feng Jiuqing looked at him and his lips curled up. He was obviously smiling, but the smile did not reach his eyes. Shen Yueji is the only daughter of General Shen. She is the leader of the Shen family, unlike Gu Yueqin, who has no status in the Gu family. Shen he is arrogant. I am the ruler, and he is the minister. Sometimes, he does not put me, the Emperor, in his eyes at all. Nearly 1 million soldiers have gone through fire and water with him, and they are loyal and devoted to him. It is easier said than done to take back his military power in one fell swoop. It has only been a few months since the Emperor ascended the throne and the foundation of the court is not yet stable. He needs the assistance of the 2 loyal officials of the Gu family and the Shen family, but the Emperor is now scheming to get rid of them. Grandmaster Kong Yin, you should know that I don't trust anyone but myself. Since I can give them supreme power, I can naturally take back this supreme glory. Currently, Great Master Kong Yin is a person that Shen regards highly. In the future, after the Gu family's power and the Shen family's military power are in Shen's pocket, Great Master can also replace them. Chapter 254. Feng Jiuqing looked down as a sharp light flashed across his eyes. The Gu family helped me seize the empire, and as they wished, I gave them supreme power. All the men of the Gu family are placed in important positions in the imperial court. Who in the Feng country would dare to disrespect them? The so-called aristocratic families can't last forever. They have enjoyed the glory for so long, it's time for a change. He brushed his robe and stood up. As he stood up, Kong Yin also stood up. Your Majesty, I will return to the capital the day after tomorrow. I will give Master Kong Yin 1 day to consider. What do you think? I only have one question for Your Majesty. If one day, I help your majesty get rid of the Shin and Gu families. How long will the glory your majesty has promised me last? After knowing Feng Zhiqing for so long, Kong Yin had figured out some of his character. Whether it was the brothers who had risked their lives with him or the founding ministers who had helped him conquer the empire, they would not be in power for long. He was ambitious, cautious and guarded against them. He would never allow their forces to grow in secret. It could be said that from the day he gave them power, he had already been thinking of ways to get rid of them. Only officials who were constantly changing would not have the chance to make friends in private. 1 year, or maybe 3 years. Master Kong Yin knows me well. He watched as that spotless snow-white brocade robe disappeared into the distance. His slender and ramrod-straight figure was like an immortal stepping on the moon as he left gracefully. Yet, it was such a harmless man who was scheming and vicious. Master, have you really thought about becoming an official in the imperial court? Ling He walked behind him, her face full of worry. Kong Yin turned around and looked at him. Becoming an official in the imperial court has been my wish for many years. If I hadn't met someone carelessly, I wouldn't have stayed in this temple for so many years. No matter what, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for me. But, Linger was a bit hesitant. Master has been a teacher for so many years and is used to seeing all kinds of people. The Emperor's thoughts are meticulous and his methods are cruel. It looks like everything is done for others, but they don't know that everything is planned by him. The eldest daughter of the Gu family was deeply in love with him for 9 years, but in the end, he used the excuse of pleasing the Gu family to set up an affair with someone else. Now, His Majesty has his eyes on the Gu and Shin families. The eldest daughter of the Shin family is arrogant and straightforward. Seeing how His Majesty loves the late Empress so much and is still thinking about her even after her death, I'm afraid that His Majesty will attach more importance to His Majesty. After all, it was rare to see an emperor who was so affectionate. Feng Zhiqing had a peerless beauty that could make anyone fall head over heels for her. She also had a gentle and amiable personality. In this world, there was no woman who could resist her. Hearing this, Kong Yin shook his head. His Majesty was right about one thing. No one's right can be delayed forever. On the contrary, if it were this monk, I would also be the same. However, compared to the Gu and Shin clans, this monk has more foresight. Within 3 years, I will resign from my official position and return to my hometown. In this way, not only will I be able to preserve my life, but I will also be able to fulfill my long-cherished wish. Although His Majesty is good at scheming, he is also a wise ruler. It's just that his thoughts are deep and he can't tolerate any sand in his eyes. That's why he doesn't trust others. Hearing Kong Yin's words, Ling He didn't say anything else. She knelt in front of him and said, Ling He's life belongs to Master. I hope that Master will bring Ling He along no matter where you go. Ling He is willing to serve Master with all my heart. Kong Yin didn't say anything. He just helped Ling up and looked at the scenery outside the window with her. Ling actually, what I said to His Majesty was true. The eldest daughter of the Shin family is no longer the person she used to be. Master, what are you talking about? I don't understand. Chapter 255. The night was as dark as ink. Shin Yueji looked at the candle on the coffee table. The candle was half burnt, but she didn't feel sleepy at all. Feeling upset, she ordered someone to bring hot water and planned to take a bath. As soon as she stepped into the tub, she heard the door being pushed open. She didn't open her eyes and leaned comfortably in the tub, as if she already knew who was pushing the door open. Put the clothes on the screen. I'll wear them myself. You can go to sleep first. There was no reply. Footsteps approached her. Shin Yueji narrowed her eyes and was about to turn around. A big hand climbed up her delicate snow-white skin. She was shocked and turned around. The man's peerless facial features were exposed in front of her. Instinctively, Shin Yueji hurriedly covered her chest with her hands and squatted down in the tub. She gritted her teeth and said, "Bastard, who allowed you to come in? Get out of here right now." The man didn't move. His dark eyes fell on her delicate and exquisite body. There was a faint flame in his eyes. Shin Yueji saw him staring at her unscrupulously. She flew into a rage and splashed the water in the tub on his face. The man's handsome face was wet. The way the girl in the water splashed water at him was very cute. However, the man's eyes were on the two white lumps. His Adam's apple moved subconsciously. His was so beautiful. In the past, Shin Yueji had tried to seduce him with her naked body. He still remembered that he hated her so much that he wanted to slap her to death. Her entire body was so ugly that it made him lose his appetite. But now it was different. It was still that body, but the beauty in front of him made him unable to move his eyes away. Even from so far away, he could vaguely smell the intoxicating fragrance from her body. Shin Yueji was embarrassed and angry. She knew where his eyes were. Her face was as red as a cooked duck and she turned her back to him. Damn it! Mo Wushang's eyes darkened as he watched her smooth and slender back dive into the clear water. Her curvy and graceful figure seemed to be locked in the depths of the water, where the man's gaze was too focused and never left her. Shin Yueji was so angry that her whole body trembled. She simply reached out and wanted to grab the clothes hanging on the screen. Later, she grabbed nothing and realized that double happiness had not come in to deliver the clothes to her. The one she had taken off previously was lying on the ground not far away. If she wanted to take it, she would have to get out of the bathtub naked first. Shin Yueji gritted her teeth in anger. Why didn't she feel that this man was so shameless before? Could he not live without a woman? You're still looking. There was anger in her voice. Mo Wushang gradually regained his senses. He stretched out his hand and climbed onto her slippery waist. Shin Yueji was shocked. Mo Wushang, you bastard. He pulled her out of the bathtub effortlessly. Shin Yueji's eyes widened in anger and embarrassment. She was naked in his arms and couldn't resist. She hurriedly pulled his loose robe to cover her body. In a flurry, she pulled randomly on his body. In the end, she didn't know where she grabbed. It was hard and bulging, it was burning hot. She had only grabbed it with her small hand, but it was so high. It was so terrifying that it scared her. Chapter 256. There was a blush on his handsome face, but Shin Yueji's whole body was now red, so she had no time to observe him. She kept wiping his body with her hand in disgust and angrily scolded, "Beast, beast, hooligan, shameless." Mo Wushang moved his lips but didn't say anything. The little woman was still cursing him with all her might in his arms. He carried Shin Yueji to the bed and carefully placed her in the brocade quilt. As soon as she saw the quilt, Shin Yueji hurriedly covered her whole body with it. She even buried her head in it. Get out of here." Mo Wushang felt wronged. He called her in a hoarse voice. Shin Yueji didn't want to talk to him. He pulled the quilt down with his big hand. Shin Yueji hugged it tightly and didn't give him a chance to pull it down. Mo Wushang flipped over onto the bed and lay beside her. His pair of black eyes were still locked onto the young girl who was wrapped up in the brocade quilt like a dumpling. "I feel uncomfortable." These three simple words reminded Shin Yueji of what she had just touched. Her blood was boiling. She lifted the quilt and covered his face. "Damn beast, I'm going to suffocate you." Mo Wushang didn't resist. He felt her smooth and delicate body across his waist, her delicate snow-white skin rubbing against him. The man's handsome face darkened. An inexplicable fire of lust drilled into a certain place. As Shin Yueji vented, her delicate body moved violently on his body, and the two of them, Shin Yueji, who was not wearing any clothes, felt that thing the most obvious. Schwa, her face became even redder. She quickly turned over from Mo Wushang's body and wrapped herself tightly with the quilt again. Damn it, sob, it was really shameful. It was the first time in her life that she felt so shameful. She covered her face with the quilt and wanted to cry but had no tears. Mo Wushang took a deep breath and sat up from the bed. There were big drops of cold sweat on his smooth forehead. He turned back and looked at the girl who wrapped herself in the quilt. He didn't give up and called out in a hoarse voice. Beast! You are a beast in human clothing. Get out. If you don't, I'll call for help. The man swallowed hard and lay down beside her again. They won't care. Shin Yueji, don't call me. Shin Yueji covered her ears. She covered her ears with both hands. The man's dark eyes flickered and he took this opportunity to pull the blanket aside, pulling her delicate body into his embrace. Shin Yueji was just about to struggle. Ugh, her lips were forcefully sealed by the man, and he sucked on her lips heavily. Shin Yueji angrily hammered his chest and kicked him harder with her feet. Who knew that the man would pull her small hand down, until the scorching heat entered Shin Yueji's hand again. Her body trembled, and even the man froze. Not daring to look at Shin Yueji's reaction, Mo Wushang was at a loss. He didn't want that, he just felt helpless. He wanted, Shin Yueji's small hand was still on top. Feeling the terror of that thing, her body trembled and her small hand trembled. She almost forgot to retract her hand. Og. Chapter 257. Pervert. Shin Yueji slapped him in the face and kicked him harder. Her feet flailed wildly, and the man groaned. His delicate face seemed to have become a little ugly because of her random kicks. His face was dark. Shin Yueji stopped her crazy movements and looked at him. The man gasped, glared at her fiercely, turned around and ignored her. Shin Yueji didn't know what happened. She stared at the man's narrow back and poked him with her fingers. Hello. What was wrong with this man in the middle of the night? Hello. The man didn't move, and Shin Yueji continued to poke him. Are you okay? Who told you to bully me like that just now? Did I kick you? Are you okay? She heard from her mother that the man's private part was very fragile. A little carelessness might break it. Thinking of this, Shin Yueji was a little gloating. Good, let him bully her. It was probably because of her complacency that the man sensed it. His tall body suddenly turned around. He met Shin Yueji's complacent eyes and the smile on her face. The man's dark eyes were heavy, his handsome face was cold, and his sharp lips were tightly pursed. Shin Yueji licked her dry lips and looked at him. Are you okay? I have something to do. Should I ask Double Happiness to find a doctor to take a look at you? Mo Wushang's dark eyes rolled, and his eyes fell on her red lips. Help me take a look. At the thought of really seeing that thing later, Shin Yueji waved her hand and smiled awkwardly. Oh, Regent, are you kidding? I'm not a doctor. The man took her fluttering little hand and pulled her into his arms. It's only needs to look at it. Her face instantly turned as red as an apple. Shin Yueji gritted her teeth angrily in his arms. You shameless man, that's your own. I don't care about it. Mo Wushang buried his head in her neck and sucked hard. It's G-ers. Shen Yueji was afraid that if she continued to argue with him, the man would do something more outrageous. She quickly raised her hands to surrender. Stop it. I want to sleep. She pulled the brocade quilt closer and covered herself tightly. Being naked in the same quilt with a man made her face inexplicably hot. In her heart, she cursed him more than 100 times. What a shameless man. He was not a gentleman at all. Miss, it's bad. Suddenly, Double Happiness's anxious voice came from outside the door. Shen Yueji was shocked. She lifted the quilt and suddenly remembered that she was naked. She was shocked and quickly covered herself with the quilt. What's the matter? Double Happiness did not care about anything else and directly pushed the door open. When she saw the two of them sharing the same bed and Shen Yueji tightly wrapped herself in the brocade quilt, she was already used to it. First, she bowed respectfully towards Mo Wushang. Prince Regent, this servant does not wish to disturb you and my young Mississippi. This matter is rather serious. Please wait for this servant to finish before you continue. Shen Yueji, speak. The man's face was as black as ink and as cold as a blade as he lightly spat out a word. Chapter 258. Shen Yueji rubbed the space between her eyebrows. Didn't Li Yingying promise her before she left? She shouldn't make trouble again, right? Or, she squinted at the man on the bed, and her dark eyes flashed. She thought of something and stretched out her white hand to Shuangxi. Bring me the clothes. Shuangxi didn't dare to hesitate. He quickly found the clothes and handed them to her. Taking the dress from her, Shen Yueji squinted at the man sitting next to her. Seeing that he was staring at her without any intention of avoiding her, she gnashed her teeth and glared back at him. Close your eyes. Mo Wushang's handsome face was slightly cold. I saw everything just now. Such bold words made Shuangxi's ears pricked up instantly. Saw. Shen Yueji flew into a rage. She threw a dress over his head to block his sight and put on the quilt carelessly. Mo Wushang silently pulled down the dress covering his head. Shen Yueji was also fast. When he pulled down the dress, she had already put on her inner clothes. It was related to Li Yingying. At this time, Shen Yueji was really afraid that something would happen to Li Yingying. She got off the bed barefooted. Halfway through, she looked back at the man sitting motionlessly on the bed. She was surprised. Aren't you going with me? The man quietly raised his eyebrows. I'll warm your bed. Thinking of his cold aura, Shen Yueji couldn't help but shiver. She stepped forward and pulled him. Even if you warm me for 10 days and 10 nights, this quilt may not be warm. Come with me. In the past, she had been in charge of this matter and had never taken the initiative to invite him to participate. Mo Wushang was a little surprised, but he was still pulled down from the bed and obediently walked to the backyard. Xiaoyu waited anxiously at the door. Huge pearl-like tears rolled down her cheeks. Listening to the screams of Miss in the room, she hated that she couldn't bear the pain herself. Seeing Shen Yueji's figure from afar, she quickly jumped down the stairs and knelt in front of Shen Yueji. She cried breathlessly. Your Highness, please save my miss. Shen Yueji also heard the screams in the room. It was not an exaggeration to describe it as heart-wrenching, helpless, and miserable. She frowned. What happened to your young miss? Xiao Hui sobbed. This servant's young miss is on her period. Menstruation. The corner of Shuangxi's mouth twitched. Wasn't it normal to have a stomachache during menstruation? However, when he heard Li Yingying's screams, which were more miserable than having her bones dug out, it was a little unbelievable. Xiao Yu raised her head as if she had just noticed that there was a man beside Shin Yueji. His body was tall and straight, and his face was handsome. His sharp lips were pursed like a sharp blade, and his pitch-black eyes were like the calm after a violent storm, making it impossible for anyone to ignore them. Hidden in those pitch-black eyes was the coldness of the owner of those eyes, making it difficult for anyone to get close to him. His black robe couldn't conceal his powerful aura. This kind of aura made people feel as if they had fallen into an icy river, freezing their bodies. The man's appearance was the most handsome man she had ever seen. Even the eldest young master of the Shin family couldn't compare to him. However, Xiao Yu didn't dare to look at his exquisite and handsome face too closely. She was afraid that if she looked at him for too long, her eyeballs would be gouged out. Chapter 259. At this point, Xiao Hui's tears fell uncontrollably. Your Highness, you may not know this, but on the first day of Miss's period, Madam ordered a maid to bring Miss a bowl of nourishing medicinal soup in the name of Mrs. Good. She watched Miss drink it with her own eyes before she was willing to let it go. My Miss couldn't refuse. Even though she knew there was something in the soup, she still drank the so-called soup. Ever since she drank the soup, every time my Miss had her period, her body would feel as if it was being pricked by needles, or as if her bones were being smashed by a rock. Every day before her period, Miss would feel pain for an entire day. Thinking of the past, that unbearable pain almost made Miss lose her life many times. She bit her tongue so hard that it bled. Xiao Yu watched anxiously from the side. But she didn't know what to do. They were bullied by the people in the residence. Not to mention the masters of the residence, even the maids could beat and scold them. They didn't treat them as human beings at all. Miss didn't have money to hire a doctor, so she had to endure for so many years, Your Highness. My Miss is the most pitiful person in this world. I beg you, please save my Miss. Shin Yueji gestured for double happiness to help her up. Xiao Yu was still sobbing, but the screams inside didn't stop. Instead, they became louder, making one's heart wrench. Shin Yueji remembered that Li Yingying's days in the residence could be said to be extremely difficult for her to even take a step. Compared to the hardships she had suffered in the Prime Minister's residence, sometimes it was even worse. Double happiness, you are proficient in medicine. Go and have a look. Yes, Mississippi. After double happiness went in, Shin Yueji followed closely. When Mo Wushang followed behind her, Xiao Yu hesitated. She wanted to stop him but didn't dare to. There was a difference between men and women. How could a man enter a Mrs. chamber? But when she mustered up her courage to stop him, she was suppressed by the strong and cold aura of the black-robed man. She almost broke her legs and knelt on the ground again. This man had such a strong aura, Miss. After checking Li Yingying's pulse, double happiness walked out and stood in front of Shin Yueji, looking worried. Shin Yueji took a sip of the tea that Mo Wushang had poured for her. How is it? Shuangshi turned his head to look at Xiao Yu and said, this is a special drug used by the madams of rich families to punish disobedient concubines. It is called Forbidden Child. It doesn't do any harm to the human body, but it is mainly used on women. It will make them hover between life and death. Forbidden Child. Shin Yueji had never heard of this kind of medicine. On the contrary, when Xiao Yu heard the two words Forbidden Child, her face suddenly became incomparably pale. The big families, officials, and aristocratic families in the capital were forbidden to use this medicine. However, in the small places and regions outside the capital, this medicine was sold very well. It was no wonder that Shin Yueji didn't know about it. Child prohibition doesn't mean that a woman is forbidden from getting pregnant. It's just that every time a woman has a period, the woman will feel the pain of giving birth. Is there an antidote? There is no antidote, but I can take it out. Oh. But I'm afraid Miss Li might not be willing to do so. Xiao Yu fell to the ground with a pale face. If it is taken out, this servant's miss will never be able to give birth again. To a woman, not being able to give birth was a fatal blow. In the future, no one would dare to marry her. Chapter 260. Double happiness was right about one thing, but not entirely right. Although it was not harmful to the human body, some of the women who were afflicted with the forbidden pill could not bear the pain once, and would just hit their heads and die. Young Miss had endured it for so many years because of the hatred in her heart, and she knew she could not die. But no woman could endure such pain. Young Miss's body was getting weaker and weaker. If the pain continued, even if she could bear it, she would die sooner or later. Li Yingying's cries seemed to be much softer, leaving only a faint moan. I just gave Miss Li a few needles, but it can only temporarily relieve the pain. Moreover, it was only effective this time. I'm afraid I won't be able to help her next time. Double Happiness saw Shen Yueji's doubts and explained. If the forbidden pill was not removed, Li Yingying might not be able to live for long under such painful torture. But if the forbidden pill was removed, Shen Yueji knew that the women in the imperial harem fought fiercely, and used endless methods. The women in this mansion were not inferior at all. She got up and walked towards Li Yingying on the bed. She lay weakly on the bed, sweating profusely. Her eyelashes trembled slightly, and her pale, bloodless face revealed the helplessness and despair she exuded. She had a strong desire to live, and this desire had kept her going until now. Mo Wushang saw her get up and followed her. Until he saw the face of the woman on the bed, his black eyes suddenly shrank. Not long after, he moved his gaze from Li Yingying's face to Shen Yueji. Previously, he did not understand why Shen Yueji would go through so much trouble to let Shen Yueji go to Zhongzhou to bring her into the palace. He had never been interested in other women, so he did not ask much until Ji Chu came back and told him about it. He said that Li Yingying was very much like a person, and her words were careful, as if she was afraid to say it in detail. He listened without any expression on his face, as if she was a stranger. Even though she looked very similar to Gu Yuqin, this face, as well as the feeling she gave him, were all unfamiliar. With just a glance, Mo Wushang knew that she wasn't Gu Yuqin. He vaguely guessed the reason why Shen Yueji had gone through so much trouble to bring her into the palace, and his handsome brows furrowed even deeper. He did not understand why she would do this, she had always liked that man. Why did she still? Mo Wushang had never thought that his mind would be in such a mess because of a woman. Wherever she went, he would follow. He would leave everything behind just to be by her side. To him, this was a great satisfaction. Shen Yueji's heart was on Li Yingying, so she didn't have the time to care about his thoughts. She sat on the edge of the bed and stared at Li Yingying's pale face for a while. How do you feel now? Thank you, Li Yingying smiled weakly at her. Did you hear what I said just now? Yes. Li Yingying lowered her eyes and remained silent for a long time before she spoke. It was a hoarse word filled with infinite loneliness, expressing the grievances and humiliation the young girl had suffered all these years. Seeing her like this, Shen Yueji waved her hand and asked them to leave first. Mo Wushang glanced at her. Perhaps because he had something on his mind, he didn't have much of a reaction. He just walked to the opposite tea table and sat down. He didn't seem to have any intention of leaving. Chapter 261. Imperial Concubine, please help me. Li Yingying raised her misty eyes and held Shen Yueji's hands tightly. Her words were sincere and full of pleading. Shen Yueji frowned. How do you want me to help you? I know my body. If I don't take out the forbidden seed, I'm afraid I won't live for long. I've been hurt and tortured by the forbidden seed for so many years. My body has long been tortured and hollowed out. I haven't finished what I want to do. I can't die. What do you want to do? Li Yingying pursed her lips and looked at her deeply. She struggled to get up from the bed and seemed to want to kneel in front of her. Shen Yueji saw this and just helped her up. We're not in the palace now. There are not so many rules. Just say what you want to say. My mother was the daughter of a big family. She met Li Yao, who went to the capital to take the imperial examination and fainted on the way to Zhongzhou. Speaking of the past, Li Yingying's voice trembled. It was a painful past. Every time she thought of it, her heart would ache. When Li Yao was young, he was handsome and full of talent. When my mother reached the age of marriage, she fell in love with the young man she saved at first sight. That man was full of flowery words and vows of eternal love. My mother believed him and insisted on marrying him despite her family's obstruction. She even got pregnant with me first. It was a shameful thing for an unmarried woman to get pregnant before marriage. My mother's family had no choice but to marry her to Li Yao as she wished. Li Yao was a weak scholar. He was full of talent but had no place to use it. Even when he went to the capital to take the imperial examination, he failed to get a place. He was depressed all day and my mother felt sorry for him. She took the initiative to persuade my grandmother to take out a sum of money to help him buy an official position. Li Yingying's frail body started to tremble. Li Yao got the position he wanted, so of course he was so happy that he couldn't close his mouth. He loved mother even more, but the good times didn't last long. Just as Li Yao's career was about to start, a mother and son came and ruined the happiness and peace of our family of 3. My mother was kind. She saw that the mother and son were lonely and had no one to rely on, so she took them in and treated them as honored guests. But that mother and son have the heart of a snake and a scorpion. They are ingrates that will never be tamed. They entered the mansion with a clear purpose. That woman is even more shameless. She has only been in the mansion for a few months and she has already climbed into Li Yao's bed. Mother wholeheartedly sought benefits for her husband and emptied her own maternal family. Li Yao was proud in the bureaucracy and had a great reputation in Zhongzhou. My mother's maternal family wholeheartedly supported him and helped him rise to a high position. They gave everything they had to buy an official position for him, but in the end, he colluded with others and completely destroyed the Xia family. The 100 slaves of the Xia family, including my grandmother and the others, were all beheaded by him on charges of colluding with wealthy merchants, stealing official finances, and colluding with the enemy. Chapter 262. Moreover, he appeared in front of my mother in a sorry state and gave my mother the title of savior. The Xia family was destroyed by them, but that woman was still not satisfied. She mixed my grandmother's flesh and blood with food and made them into buns and sent them to my mother's abandoned backyard. After the Xia family had completely lost their power, the cruel and unscrupulous couple completely exposed their true intentions. They cruelly tortured my mother, forcing her to eat her mother's penis and make her drink the blood of her relatives. They locked her up in the deserted backyard and forbade anyone from bringing her food. Every day, they would scrape a piece of flesh from her body and forbid anyone from treating her. 1 year. 1 year, Li Yingying's eyes were filled with hot tears. Her red eyes were completely bloodshot. Her white teeth were chattering and her body was trembling. Mother was strong enough to survive. She used all her strength to protect me. I saw the flesh on her body being sliced clean, leaving only a pile of white bones. I saw the organs inside. I saw her pale face. I saw the tears in her eyes. I saw the bright red organs fall helplessly on her body. Li Yingying's eyes were filled with hot tears. Her eyes were bloodshot and her white teeth were chattering. That shameless couple would come to see her every day and torture her. That bitch even ordered people to pour the most disgusting things into her mouth. Worms, feces of wild dogs. Li Yingying bit her lip until it bled. She couldn't help but hold Shen Yueji's hand tightly as if that hand was her last outlet. She didn't know how much strength she had used. The sad thing was that at the moment of her death, my mother still asked me to call him father. She told me not to be rebellious to him and not to blame him. In fact, in Li Yingying's heart, she had long hated that cruel bastard to the core. If it wasn't for her mother's dying wish, she wouldn't even be willing to call him father. After my mother died, they continued to follow suit. They ground my mother's bones and cooked the remaining pieces of flesh into a nourishing soup for me to eat. I want to live. If I don't eat it, I know that they have 100 ways to force me to eat it. I can't endure that cruel torture anymore. I want to live. I told myself repeatedly in my heart that I must live. I saw them serving my mother's meat soup to me. I wolfed it down and gulped it down. They saw that I looked like I hadn't eaten for hundreds of years. They laughed heartily until tears rolled down their cheeks. They laughed at my stupidity, mocking my foolishness. I even dared to eat my own mother's flesh. Li Yingying clenched her fists. Only when I acted stupid and listened to them would they beat me less and torture me less, giving me a chance to breathe. The Xia family fell and my mother died. When I was young, I was alone and had no one to rely on. They had a good reputation in Zhongzhou and were loved by the people. No matter what I said, they wouldn't believe me. Even my life was saved by that bitch. I should have died with the Xia family, but she knelt on the execution platform in front of the people of Zhongzhou, crying that I was still young and begging for my life. Rather than saying that Li Yingying had endured humiliation for so many years, it would be more accurate to say that she was waiting for an opportunity. When the opportunity came, she would definitely grab it with all her might. This was also why she had come to Zhongzhou without any reason when she had asked Shen Yueji to fetch her. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.